What is up, ladies and gentlemen, YouTube? That is right. I am Chris Smith, and I got a video for you today. Now, today we're going to be talking about The Expanse, Episode 2. That's right. I just watched it, and I got my notes, I got my mind, and I got my opinion. Now, let's talk about this. Now, The Expanse, if you didn't see my first review, then go ahead, watch it, and then you can watch this one if you haven't, or do this one first. I don't know. Whichever one is your opinion. Now, I will say this, right? I enjoyed this episode, and this episode was probably a bit more interesting than the first episode, which is good because you don't want any show technically, just being lived up to the first episode hype, and then they never really recover from that hypeness that was the pilot or whatever you want to call it. Now, this episode pretty much picks up exactly where the first episode left off. Miller is still on his case. He's looking for Julie. Holden and his rest of his crew, they're still in the shuttle, and they're kind of just stuck, kind of floating in space of sorts. Eventually, we realize that Holden and his crew are running out of air supply in the shuttle, and then they have to quickly kind of find air. But then you realize that this is not quite an easy task. It's easier said than done, but yes. Yeah, that's pretty much the whole plot of this kind of episode. Now, let's talk about some good things. And it's not really any bad things really I had. Maybe just a small kind of nitpicks here, but this is what I think, right? I personally like this show so far, to the point where I feel like they add intention very well, right? Now, even though it's a very sad thing that the Holden's crew and whatnot, all the people like his girlfriend and all died, I personally feel like it's easier to actually like these characters, or at least get to know these characters when they're in a smaller setting, right? And not only that, but you do see a bit tension on the shuttle. There's like 4 or 5 members on the crew. It was 1 woman, 4 guys, I believe. And it just adds this tension because I feel like when it's in a smaller environment, people just get a little bit, claustrophobic because it feels like it's small places kind of closing in on you. So to me, I personally enjoyed that. It seemed like this show knows how to have mystery and intrigue, and at the same time build up a lot of tension. And that's one thing where I'm seeing that the show capitalizes very well on. Thomas Jane, he's still doing his thing. Miller is a interesting character. I feel like I feel like people think he's a bad guy or a bit of an anti-hero, but at the exact same time, he's a bit more clear-cut in some way than kind of people give him credit for. It's something I still feel like it's not really working to me is the Jay Hernandez character. I feel like now it says he's guest starring, so I'm guessing he's not going to be here very long. So I guess that's not really a problem. But I will say this, Jay Hernandez, I like Jay Hernandez, but he just seems like he's kind of there for now. And I guess he is since he's only just guest starring. Now, as I said, Miller, he goes to Julie's apartment. He started looking for clues. We see a couple of messages showing that Julie has a bit of a bad relationship with her father. She kind of ran away. She's a bit of a rebel and whatnot. Eventually, we kind of see Thomas Jane looking into her records, and I guess the symbolism for the hamster was supposed to mean something. I'm not sure. The hamster 1 minute was green, with green eyes, and then the next second it was with red eyes and running and whatnot. So I don't know necessarily what that means, but who knows, really. Also, for when Thomas Jane was looking at Julie's messages and whatnot, as I said, it showed that she had a bit of a falling out with her parents. She is trying to be a bit of a rebel, and then eventually when he's looking at, I guess, some profiles or whatever that she had, they think it's a birthmark, but it's actually a scar, and showing that she's trying to show she's different than what people, I guess, believe her to be or want her to be. But yeah, it's interesting to see who Julie actually is and why is she so important so far to the story. But yes, and then we go back to Holden. Him and his crew, they're trying to find air. They're collapsing out. One of the negatives I kind of had with this thing was that it seemed like nobody, particularly the men on this episode, even Holden himself, it seemed like nobody necessarily knew how to handle this situation. The guy from Royal Pains, he's losing his shit quickly, and you would think, well, first of all, why did you even? Well, he had no choice really, but and if he goes on any mission, why would you want him at all if he's just going to panic just like that? He had to really snap out of it. One thing I did like, and it started to seem like we were getting to know a bit more about her since we didn't hear too much about anybody really except Holden, which is Naomi. I liked Naomi in this episode, and I think she was actually probably the star of this episode, especially just in general, even with Miller stuff and whatnot. because she stepped up, right? While everybody, all the men on the shuttle were kind of like losing their shit, she was the only one that actually managed to kind of, keep a clear head. She was, staying straight. Once at the very beginning, we get a bit of a flashback slash nightmare of sorts where Holden's remembering the first time he and his girlfriend kind of like met, and then he breaks out of it when she's saying, there's something I have to tell you. And I said it in the first recap or review or whatever, where it was pretty obvious that most likely, I'm assuming she's pregnant, but who knows? They could do a swerve. I feel like this show may not go for the obvious. They may actually try to go for a bit of a spin to it. So who knows? If it's a baby, then I kind of call that to begin with. But if it's not, it's interesting to see what it actually would be. But yeah. Not only that, but after that flashback, he wakes up. They're shown, dodging a debris field, and once that happens, Holden kind of, goes a little bit vengeful a bit before he snaps out of that state, saying, he wants to go after the people that attacked, his crew and his ship or whatnot, or not his ship, but their ship, everybody, the crew members on his shuttle ship. All right, there you go. It's complicated. But yes, once he's about to do that, he's about to kind of like chase after them. He gets denied by everybody in the shuttle, and then he kind of gets put in his place, and then that's kind of like when Naomi kind of takes over, and then eventually they're trying to find his radio, whatnot, go outside, but some people and two members of the crew, they're passing out because they're losing air, they're losing oxygen. They're trying hard to fix this thing, and then eventually they fix it. They realize that, it was all a bit of a waste because the radio didn't even work that they were trying to find. And then, Holden goes batshit crazy a bit. He's trying to contact someone. And then once they contact someone, it's actually the same people that attacked their ship, in the first episode, which was kind of one of the negatives of this thing. And be like, wouldn't you think that if you're trying to contact anyone for help, wouldn't you think that maybe it might be the same people that, attacked you before, because this is their area to operate in? You don't think they would honestly just leave randomly. I just thought that was just kind of dumb, or maybe he wasn't clearly thinking. Maybe he's in desperate need because they were going to die, and they're still going to die, pretty much. It's just that nobody seemed like they had any hope in this episode. It just seemed like they all was just like, we're going to die. We're facing it, especially the guy from Royal Pains. Snap out of it. But yes, once that happens, eventually they do get caught. They do get a bit of a, they get somebody picking them up, and it turns out that it's actually the same people that, attacked them. It's the Mars Navy or the Mars Republic, whatever. Eventually they catch them. They grab them. They grab the shuttle and they bring it into the Martian Navy ship. And then eventually, they get caught. They come inside. They say this is Mars Republic. And then they get them at gunpoint, and then that's pretty much it. Like I said, it was a very, heart-pounding thing once they were kind of, getting taken in. So I liked that. Another thing that I was kind of liking is that kind of the government stuff. It's kind of interesting, but it's on the fence for me. Krista or whatever it is, the lady from the government, United Nations. When she's like not torturing the guy per se, she did that last episode, but when she's trying to find information. She said, she this isn't the Cold War, so it's kind of interesting to see how this the government stuff works. I feel like they're touching upon it, but I feel like there's still more to be played here, and maybe it has something to do with Julie. Who knows? But that is my review. I actually enjoyed this episode. I thought this was a good episode, and it seemed like it was a bit more interesting than the premiere of sorts. Positive Naomi, she stepped up, and I actually started to like her more. Miller is great. The intrigue is still there. The tension is building. I'm starting to like some of these characters, and yes, this was a pretty good episode. The world's there. Jay Hernandez is okay, but the government stuff could be worked on, and I'm sure it will be. But that's my review. Comment, subscribe, like. I'm Chris Smith. I'm signing out.